economy. However, the reality is he inherited an economic expansion that was already happening for 7.5 years before he took office.
Democratic Congressman Brendan Boyle there. So what about the speech itself and how it was delivered? Well, Anneke Green used to have a hand in crafting the State of the Union address for George W. Bush, and she joins me now. Anneke, thanks so much for coming on.
Thank you.
So what did you make of this speech? Was it the speech that you would have written for President Trump?
I don't know if I would have been as smart as his speechwriters ended up being, which was to take a president who isn't noted for being a lofty oratician. We've seen him give good speeches. One that comes to mind was his victory speech, which I thought was very gracious and sounded different from the campaign when he won the election. But using people, using the extraordinary average Americans and even North Korean, as the case may be, to tell his story and to talk about his policy priorities, I thought was a real stroke of brilliance.
He apparently had quite a strong hand in crafting it himself. Could you tell as a professional speechwriter? I could
tell that he was repeating certain lines that he was comfortable with, and there were even points he was ad-libbing, and you could tell that that was a place that, you know, he'd maybe made a note to himself that he wanted to reiterate something. And ultimately, I mean, every president, we always say it's the president's speech, and what the White House was saying for him is the process begins and ends with the president, and anybody working for him would say, no, it really is him.
But he gets so much criticism when he goes off script or says something in the wrong tone. At what point can you, as a speechwriter, turn around and say, Mr. President, that is really not a good idea? And do they ever listen?
It really varies. It varies on the relationship that you have as a writer with the person you're writing for. It varies on the president. Like, does he want to hear that feedback? Have you built that relationship of trust? And if you haven't, then you just have to keep trying to do a better job. I know that occasionally writers don't work out. That definitely happened in the Bush White House. People wouldn't stick around because there wasn't that click, that gelling with the voice. But at the same time, some writers would really break away from the pack. There's always a team of writers, and you would see people who would just consistently, understand what they want to hear.
Anneke, what do you think is the main purpose of the State of the Union now? Because this is a president who relies on Twitter to communicate directly with the people he wants to speak to. So what's the point of this anymore?
Well, I think that's a really great question, and I was thinking about that. Twitter really, as a medium, has become a place that can drive the news cycle, and you can get stories from there. What are people talking about? What do they care about? But I think the State of the Union is still very relevant. It is in a line of unbroken tradition that I think is important, but beyond that, it's such a night of pomp and ceremony and circumstance, and so many millions of people tune in, and then they talk about it on Twitter, and you really see what moments or what lines resonated with people and what kind of rises to the top. And I think that becomes valuable information for the writer and for the president.
And very quickly, what would you have liked to have seen in it that wasn't?
Oh, they addressed so many things, and I thought I was pretty happy with that. I thought we could have heard a little bit more about what plans they proposed to deal with the opioid crisis, and I think that's something that the Trump team always has to deal with.
Anneke Green, thank you very much indeed for joining me.
Thank you so much.
Let's have a quick look at some of the day's other news now. In the British